Alongside Eric Kane, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs, I'm Austin Price for the Rocky Top Roundtable as this Georgia week rolls on. And guys, obviously Tennessee's dispatched of two mediocre opponents to this point, but they've done it the way you're supposed to do it against teams that you're better than. This week, definitely a big change with Georgia rolling into town. It's the one team that Josh Heupel's not beat. It's the one team that Josh Heupel's had very little success against on offense. How can they change that?
Well, they got to win the middle of the field for me. I think that's kind of my point with this team is I just think Tennessee has to win in the middle. I think Georgia's done a really good job, Eric, the last few years, bringing some stuff up the middle in terms of A-gap blitzes, inside linebacker stuff. I think Georgia offensively has attacked Tennessee in the middle of the field, but I think for Josh Heupel in this offense, they've got to handle the middle, which they've not been able to do against Georgia on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, last year your defense was so good. A lot of times you played zone in the back end. You relied on that front four to get pressure. It worked for a lot of those games, right? College football playoff team. It did not work against Georgia. And you can't sit back there and just do the same thing over and over again where Carson Beck just torched you down the middle of the field. So it's Gunnar Stockton this year. Obviously, they have two really good tight ends, albeit haven't used them a lot in two mediocre teams they played so far. But I think middle of the field defensively. And then I think, on the perimeter, I think Tennessee's wide receivers have got to bring a physicality that Tennessee wide receivers in this game have not done to this point. Kirby has got those corners on lockdown, very physical. They cannot get pressed the line on a routine basis. I think that's something to be looking out for. The perimeter game in this game as well, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee has had just struggled. I guess the way I think Tennessee has not looked like Tennessee in this game. In any of the four matchups, offensively, I mean specifically, we've not seen any of the signature Josh Heupel big plays in this game. They've never been able to crank up the run game against Georgia. And again, it's the one team on the schedule that they just haven't. They've never had a Josh Heupel type game. You mentioned the perimeter. I'm talking the perimeter on Tennessee. They've not been able to get those big plays. And against this defense, I mean, it's almost imperative that you get some big plays. But Jalen Wright shook loose, in the first play of the game a couple years ago. But the passing game, Tennessee's not hit Georgia that way. And quite frankly, that's a difficult matchup, as you mentioned. Georgia's defensive backs have manhandled Tennessee's receivers in recent years. And I like the talent Tennessee has at receiver, but it's young, and Georgia is loaded in the back end.
To Rob's point, Austin, 17 yards, 21 yards, the two longest pass plays the last two seasons in this matchup between two teams. They've not had those explosives.
And they've not had like you go back to Florida, you go back to Alabama, even in the ones they missed, the shots were there, right? They just missed them.
Agreed.
They've not had the guy running free against Georgia. Talking about the running game, Tennessee won 32 years ago, 80 of that was on the first play.
Yeah.
Last year, they actually did, I thought, run it more effectively. They ran for 152. Now, it was a lot of that in the first half. But, again, last year was the closest game in the series since Heupel got here. Are they gaining, or was that just a one-year aberration? We're going to find out Saturday. And the biggest thing is, how does the quarterback play? Quarterback play has been great through two games, Brent. Lights a little brighter on Saturday. It's going to be a little faster game. The defense is going to get after him a little quicker. Offensive line, protection, all that stuff. Even the running back pass protection is going to have to be really on point.
Well, and I think it goes back to the middle of the field and how does Tennessee handle things up in the middle? Are they strong enough guard, center, guard? Now, I don't see Jordan Davis on this defensive line for Georgia. I don't see Jalen Carter, but they have good players up there. Tennessee's had a hard time with the inside presence of Georgia's defense. How did they handle that in this game? You make a point about the run game last year and how it was better. I wonder if that's because Georgia, Rob, maybe wasn't as good defensively a year ago in the inside, or is that a product of Tennessee becoming more of a two tight end team and they found some success with the two tight end stuff early in that game, running the football, which was not a part of their arsenal in the first couple of matchups against Kirby Smart?
Well, I think two things. For one, I definitely think that was a factor, because I think that was a factor all year long. And so I have to believe it was a factor against Georgia and the way Tennessee was able to run the ball. And also to your point about the personnel, there's not a Jalen Carter or Jordan Adams up there, but there's a lot of guys that are going to play on Sundays. And again, I'm not trying to be down on Georgia, because they are really, really good, but they don't seem like they have those game wreckers on the edges. I don't think there's not a top 10 pick there like Trayvon Walker a couple years ago. But they're very, very good. But can they get the run game going? 4.5 yards a carry would be fantastic. They've not been close to that.
They got really good safeties. KJ Bolden's fantastic. Corners, I don't think they're as good as they've been in the past. I think that this is something where Tennessee's inexperienced receivers could be able to do something if they can get off press man. Because I do think this group's more explosive than a year ago. So, like, how does Chris Brazzell build off what he's done through 2 games? How does Mike Matthews build off what he did last week? Braylon Staley in the slot. I think the receivers are going to be uber important in this game because they need to make plays.
Yeah, and speaking with some people who cover the Georgia team, it's kind of funny. To your point, I don't think they're as good at corner as they've been in the years past, but I think they're better at corner now than they are at safety. Now, KJ Bolden, very good player. He's at 1 safety. They have a new safety in Kyron Jones, who's been the starter of the first 2 games, has a club on one of his hands. Big-time question mark, and I think there's opportunity there to attack the middle of the field with the Braylon Staley, with your tight ends to that weak link at safety. But regardless, I mean, again, it goes back to you got to win off the line of scrimmage. Can Chris Brazzell take what he did against ETSU? Again, I know the opponent, but build on that. Mike Matthews, can he take what he did against ETSU and a little bit of Syracuse and build on that? And I do, to Brent's point, I think 12 personnel is going to be a big-time focal point of this football game with Miles Kutzman, Ethan Davis, Jack Van Dorselaer. I think there's opportunity there, but it kind of goes back to establishing that run like we talked about. What do you look like on the interior? And then another question, guys, here as we enter the back half of the week, what's David Sanders looking like this week? And how does that affect the rest of the offensive line? If he's available, does he start? Does he play? Jesse Perry back down at guard, does that help the interior? Who knows? There's some questions in terms of what that offensive line could look like depending on the availability and the status of David Sanders.
There are some unknowns, right, about whether it's David Sanders or the defensive lineman, Tyree Weathersby, Jackson Moy. Until they are officially not on, the injury report, you have to consider everything with a grain of salt, right? Because, how many times have you heard, they should be good to go, and then you get Saturday morning, and it's like,
That's the last 2 weeks.
the trainer didn't see something he liked, and, he's out.
Well, and I just, there's always unknowns early in the season because you're still establishing your identity. And I don't care how many games you have under your belt, Rob, Georgia's still figuring out who they are because they played Marshall and Austin Peay. Mm-hmm. Tennessee's still figuring out who they are because they played Syracuse and they played East Tennessee State. So when you play a big matchup game like this early, there's always an element of an unknown that you have to sort through. What has Georgia not shown yet offensively and defensively? What has Tennessee not shown yet offensively and defensively? Because Tennessee has spent an enormous amount of time this offseason trying to find ways to attack Georgia defensively with their offense. So what are the wrinkles that we might see? Those show up in the first month of the season, those unknowns more so than in November when these 2 teams have been playing.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating just to, you have a couple of warm-up games and boom, you get thrown into the deep end already. Tennessee's been that way with Florida a little bit, over the years, but it doesn't feel like it's just been this abrupt.
How's that worked out, right?
Yeah, exactly. But just all of a sudden you played ETSU, you had, your Syracuse individual site game, and boom, all of a sudden here's game day, Georgia, the game that's going to dictate what how the rest of your season goes. But I like it for Tennessee because of the things you're talking about. I don't think Georgia knows what their identity is yet. Stockton obviously got thrown into some huge situations and played in some big games last year, but he's still a young quarterback that's figuring things out. And offensively, this is a Georgia team that I don't think has an identity right now.
It's why Tennessee's got to win third down on both sides of the ball. They've got to be able to extend drives when you're on offense and get off the field when you're on defense because the crowd's going to bring it. The crowd's going to be there. But too many times the crowd goes like the air out of the balloon when you give up 3rd and 9 and then 3rd and 8 and Georgia keeps bleeding the clock driving down. Even if you hold them to a field goal, you're taking the air out of the crowd. You've got to get the crowd into it, which is why I think Tim Banks has got to bring some pressure in this game early because I think last year he didn't. He relied too much on they had James Pearson, those defensive linemen that could get home. They didn't really get home. They've got to get home this year. And if that means bringing Arion Carter or Edmund Spillman or whoever off a blitz, you got to do it because I think keeping the crowd in this game is the biggest way Tennessee can impact the game and win the game.
Gunnar Stockton, his first true road start.
It
is. To your
is.
point, again, don't let the air out of the balloon a little bit. I mean, this is going to be the most hostile environment he has ever stepped foot in. How does he handle? If he gets, his face planted in the dirt, first drive of the game, how does he respond? I think it's a great opportunity for Tennessee's defense that first series and the crowd, to your point. If there's something to cheer about, make it as hard as possible for Gunnar Stockton, who has never experienced anything like that. He might handle it fine. He might not. We don't know.
And they're not loaded with the experience of veterans at receiver, either when as it pertains to converting those third and nine, third and eight, where Carson Beck just killed them last year.
Yeah, and don't put it past Kirby. He's probably already AI created the game day show and showed it to the team. They already pre-taped this pick segment, guys. They all picked Tennessee. I mean, nobody plays that underdog role like he does and kind of fires them up.
He loves it. I mean,
Yeah.
he loves the fact his team was not dominant last week, and everybody in Athens is all talking about how, man, they can't push the ball down the field offensively. They're pedestrian, everything. He's sitting back in his office loving every minute of the fact that nobody's anointed them anything. He loves to play the underdog role. I think a hidden stat in this game, too, is quarterback legs. Whose quarterback is more productive with their legs? I think Gunnar Stockton runs better than people want to give him credit for. I think they're liable to call some runs for him. Tennessee obviously did not call anything for Joey last week, as they should not have.
No.
So how much do they use him, and which of these two quarterbacks can mask a breakdown up front on the offensive line by getting out of trouble? Tennessee's not done a very good job of that the last few years when you look at the number of sacks those guys have taken. Can Joey Aguilar right a wrong, so to speak, if there's a bust in protection or the running back doesn't do his job in pass pro, and extend a play and live to play the next down?
Well, let's call it what it is. Through 2 weeks, Tennessee's not giving up a sack. They could have. He's taken a couple of plays and made a little something out of nothing. And that's,
Can he do
can
that
he
in
do
this
that
one?
in this one? Because it is the bullet's going to be going just a little faster, Rob.
And Georgia hasn't given up a sack either. So, can Tennessee get home at
Right.
all? I mean, that's exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about, AP. Can they generate some negatives?
Yeah, I think Stockton's deceptively, he's not an elite runner, but I think he's athletic enough to get out of trouble. Tennessee's rush lane integrity's got to be really good in this game, too.
Let's take Aguilar off the page. Who's the player that has to play well for Tennessee to win this game? Eric?
It's more of a phase. It's the middle of the field, kind of going back to what we talked about. So give me a safety and Andre Turrentine. They're going to be trying to pick and chew all game long. And Boo Carter, Jalen McMurray, whoever's at that star position, giving up some plays the first 2 weeks of the year on third down, middle of the field. Middle of the field, safety play, star, linebackers you can incorporate in there. I know you said one player. Give me Andre Turrentine at the middle of the field defense.
Rob?
Give me, I'm cheating a little bit, but Mike Matthews or Braylon Staley, one of the two young receivers, just because of what I mentioned earlier, I think Tennessee's got to generate a big play or multiple big plays in the passing game. You're not going to drive it, 80 yards on this defense very often. And those two guys are my best candidates to take something short, get loose, and make something happen.
I could go outside the box here with two. I could say Tim Banks, because I think he's got to have an answer in the middle of the field, but that's still in front. Eric just said, I'm going to throw one at you. I'm going to put a lot on Sam Pendleton, the center.
Yep.
Because I think they've got to communicate really well up front, because I think Georgia's going to try to come from a variety of places. The communication that they have to set protection is going to be imperative in this game.
Get the snap, too.
I'm not a big believer in Gunnar Stockton. I think he's solid. He's a man. He's a manager. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. I think this game's played somewhere teens, maybe get to 20, And in that type of game, it reminds me a lot of Texas A&M a couple of years ago. Who made the plays in that one?
Special teams.
Special teams. Give me Boo Carter.
Okay.
I think Boo Carter's ability to return punts in this game, like he did a week ago, to give Tennessee something where they got to travel 40 or 50 yards versus 80 or 90 yards, is a huge part of this game. If he can do that, to me it sets Tennessee up to where they don't have to be perfect offensively to put points on the board. So that's where we're at. Will we be right? I don't know. Saturday will tell the tale. Tennessee and Georgia. It's 3:30. For Eric Kane, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs, I'm Austin Price for the Rocky Top Roundtable.